battle of the week, and let's see what's happening in the world. One thing that we know is happening in the world is Biden is over there in Eastern Europe, definitely saying that he is still supporting Ukraine and is going to continue giving them aid and other things. As a matter of fact, he says that he may be even amping the amount of aid and all in that kind of space. But yes, the U.S. President Joe Biden met leaders of NATO's eastern flank on Wednesday. That would be today to show support for their security after Moscow suspended a landmark nuclear arms control treaty over strong Western support for Ukraine. Biden arrived in the Polish capital of Warsaw late on Monday after that surprise visit to Kiev, just days ahead of the anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine on February 24th, 2022. So that anniversary will be coming up on this coming Friday. Amid the highest tensions between Russia and the West since the Cold War over 3 decades ago, Biden addressed thousands in downtown Warsaw on Tuesday and said autocrats like Russian President Vladimir Putin must be opposed. Hours earlier, Putin delivered lengthy remarks laden with criticism of Western powers, blaming them for the war in Ukraine. Biden said the West was never plotting to attack Russia and the invasion was Putin's choice. Putin also backed away from the New START arms control treaty, a 2010 agreement that limits the number of Russian and U.S. deployed strategic nuclear warheads and warned that Moscow could resume nuclear tests. To that, Biden said he made a big mistake Biden said that of Putin's decision when asked about it as he headed into the meeting with those Eastern European allies. Earlier on Wednesday, Biden met with staff from the U.S. Embassy in Warsaw, who were gathering leaders of the Bucharest Nine, the countries on NATO's eastern flank, such as Poland, Bulgaria, and Lithuania, that joined the Western military alliance after being dominated by Moscow during the Cold War. Most are among the strongest supporters of military aid to Ukraine, and officials from the country in that group have called for additional resources such as air defense systems. At the meeting, Biden planned to reaffirm commitment to their security and discuss support for Ukraine before he returns to Washington. The Kremlin said it regards NATO, which could soon expand to include Sweden and Finland, as an existential threat to Russia. Lithuanian President Gitanas Nausėda said he wanted greater involvement of the United States in Europe, NATO's eastern flank, and more weapons sent to Ukraine. Let's give Ukraine all the weapons it needs to defeat the aggressor, Nausėda tweeted on Wednesday ahead of the meeting. Let's continue building up our own defenses. Eastern NATO flank must remain in our focus. No soft spots should be left. And of course, we all know that Lithuania was a former Soviet republic that is on Russia's doorstep, and it joined NATO in 2004 and plans to host Biden in July for the Security Alliance Leaders Summit. So not all of the Bucharest Nine have been quite so ready to aid Ukraine, notably Hungary, which has pushed back on some EU sanctions on Russia, and along with Turkey, is the only NATO member still to ratify the letting Sweden and Finland into that organization being NATO and everything. But that's some of the things that we're hearing from that side of the world. And of course, Putin has issued a nuclear warning to the U.S. and threatens to resume those weapons tests, like I said earlier. And in other news, more than 1,000 flights were canceled as major winter storms threatened to produce historic snowfall. No snowfall here in North Carolina. As a matter of fact, it feels like it's about 60 or 70 degrees, and it's been feeling that way for a few days. But hey, in other parts of the country, it is definitely falling into that whole snow region and snow kind of thing happening, but not here in this part of the world where me and Nick and other folks are. So we'll see what folks got to say about what's going on with the weather. And speaking back to Russia, China's economic support for Russia could elicit more sanctions. So maybe we're going to sanction them more since they apparently are supporting the Russian invasion and aggression and all in that space. So we'll see what the folks on the panel have to say about all of that. And there is definitely folks even in his own party that are saying that Putin's war is a year of miscalculations. Boy, that's like an understatement and a half, in my opinion, but that's just one of the things that is being said. And of course, there is even a rift between the military and the Wagner group, because the Wagner chief is accusing Russia's military leaders of treason. So that is something that's going on. And apparently, the Wagner group is also using pop culture to recruit new Russian fighters. And that's one of the things that we're hearing. And if you're wondering what's going on in other parts of our foreign policy, the Biden administration has rolled out new asylum restrictions mirroring the Trump era policy. So they apparently are having some policies that are very Trump-like, and that is what is going on as they have announced a new border crackdown. So that is something that we are seeing in that part of the world. So that is something that folks may be interested in. And apparently, Seattle has become the first U.S. city to ban caste discrimination. That's right. Seattle has become the first U.S. city to ban caste discrimination. We do know that caste discrimination exists in other parts of the world, and maybe there is a large Indian population in Seattle or some of the other ones that are caste oriented, maybe because that's why they're doing that. But I would be interested to see what folks have to say about that part of what is happening as well. And over there in Israeli forces killed 10 Palestinians in a Nablus raid, and that is what is going on in the Middle East, and I'm sure there'll be some fallout in that part. And as I mentioned before, Nigeria is about to hold Africa's largest democratic exercise. So while other things are going on, Africa is trying to hold a democratic election in the country of Nigeria. And as I mentioned yesterday, South Korean courts are granting gay couples health benefits in a landmark ruling there in South Korea. And winds are lashing the Madagascar coast as Cyclone Freddy makes landfall. So that is going to be another area of the world that might be impacted by a natural event, just like those earthquakes hit Turkey and Syria. As a matter of fact, they had a 6.3 earthquake after they had that other earthquake, and definitely the death toll is rising in that part of the world too, with that natural disaster being the reason for that particular death count and all in those lines. But we're going to bring in my panelists and see what they've got to say about a number of these things that I brought up, including what's going on in Ukraine and some of the ways that it is impacting folks very much in all in those lines. And I may bring up some things going on in the UK, because apparently Rishi Sunak is thinking about that whole Brexit deal that he's got going on with Northern Ireland. But we'll bring in our esteemed panelists and see what they've got to say about a number of these world issues, and we might even get to some United States issues as well, other than the whole notion of the winter storms, because that has definitely been dominating the news in parts of the country, but not necessarily here. And by the way, Biden, because I know folks were wondering what he was going to say about the East Palestine situation there in Ohio, and Biden has said that the train companies should clean it up in East Palestine. So EPHS chief and Ohio governor went over there and drank tap water near the train derailment site after heavy criticism. So I guess they were trying to prove that there wasn't any danger in the water. But we do know that chemical spills can have effects on people's health and all in that.
Mark, good morning. I just had a question for Nick to follow up on yesterday. Nick, your guideline is whether anyone died or not. Is that how you understand situations?
No. I mean, I have what they call national priorities, Lee. And so the thing is, and this is where these distractions take place. Our national priority is national security at the national level. It's not whether a train derailed in Miami, which happened, by the way, yesterday.
But what Mark is bringing up, there could be catastrophic consequences, whether the water quality, air quality.
Hey, listen, let's get real here, okay? 400,000 people last year died of heart-related disease. Why isn't that a national priority? 400,000, Lee, died of heart-related disease. That's not a national priority. Okay, it's national priorities are what the media tells you is a national priority. The train derailment in Palestine is not a national priority. I'm sorry.
But the consequences of it, it may be very catastrophic.
If it's next door to you, it's a priority, but it's not a national priority. What's going on in Ukraine is a national priority. Atomic weapons are a national priority. Heart disease should be up
Nick,
there, but not a national priority.
It's not necessarily an or, it could be end.
You know?
You could. We have a large government. They could do two things at the same time.
Well, I've been arguing for decades about our train system is 18th century, which it still is. Look at it.
And that's a valid point. I'm on board with you on that.
Okay, right. So the thing is, our train system does need to, our rails need to be reinvigorated so we're up to standards of a first world country. We're not. So if anything, it brought out the fact our rail system is third world. It brought out the fact that, of course, lack of regulation, which there's one panelist who believes lack of regulation is okay, obviously was not okay, because the thing is, as they pointed out quite correctly, what happened is the corporate greed pushed salaries down, and they got rid of a lot of employees in the rail industry to bring profits up. Okay, it's a natural thing of capitalism. All right, and of course, it creates this problem because there's basically very little regulation over the rails. And not only that, there's no real, this guy Butteridge, whatever his name is, worthless, because he has no plan, neither does Biden, on updating our rails to at least be equivalent to Europe or China. Right now, we're third world. Now, did the media bring that out? No, they didn't. Instead, oh, poor me, look at all the gases that were around. But even all that, it's still not a national priority. It's, it's what I call, it falls in the other category.
Hey, Nick.
So hang on, Mark. Hang on. Because if he's going to have a crack at me, I've never said that we should have.
I didn't say anything about you.
I've never said that we should have no regulations. And in fact, when it comes to you say one of the panelists here believes in no regulations. I think we all know who that's directed at. So I've never said that we should have no regulations. And in fact, I've actually said previously on several occasions that government regulations is what tempers capitalism, is what makes sure that capitalists don't abuse the public and don't impose a cost on everybody else. I agree with you that there may be some more significant priorities to the United States. However, you mentioned heart disease.
Yeah.
If the appropriate health departments in America were not paying attention to health issues such as heart disease, obesity, diabetes, all these sorts of things, if they weren't paying any attention to that at all, then you would say, why is the health department not doing anything here? I think that with the EPA not going in and testing the water earlier, with the federal government not saying anything, it's a bad look. They should be saying something about it. I mean, 2 weeks without really saying anything. Pete Buttigieg hasn't really done too much, and I don't think that looks good. That's their department. I mean, this transportation issue is clearly Pete Buttigieg's area. This is what he should be looking after. So that doesn't mean that you can't also go to the Ukraine and you can't also focus on what's happening in Europe. But this is an issue that's affecting Americans. And for your comments about the deregulation of the railway industry, well, once upon a time, there was a lot of railroads in the United States. There was a lot of competition in the United States. And what happened? The government stepped in, and all of a sudden, railroad companies became bigger. They became less competitive, and there hasn't been much of an investment there. But I will agree with Biden, actually, that this is the railroad's responsibility to fix this. And whatever the fallout is, whatever the cost of this is, it is the railroad's responsibility. But we know that private enterprise is not very good at taking responsibility for these sorts of things. And so that might be where government needs to step in and say, hey, look, the cost of this is going to be, I don't know, $5 billion, $10 billion, whatever it is, and you're wearing it. That's something that the government needs to do. That's an appropriate use of government power. Government's supposed to be there to protect the interests of everybody and to make sure that the world operates in a relatively fair way. And clearly it's unfair for any person or large corporation to impose a cost on a whole heap of people without compensating them for it.
And that's all well and good. But what I'm saying, Shaquille, it's not a national priority. In other words, our number one priority.
You're acting, Nick, as though
it is down on the list.
What you're doing, Nick, is what you always tend to do whenever there's any criticism of the president that you voted for, which is that you will twist and turn reality into something else.
Criticism of the president.
You're acting as though that because this isn't a national priority in your eyes, it shouldn't even be discussed. The federal government should be like,
it should be
a
discussed,
train
but
derailment with a whole heap of
not-
chemicals spilt into an area? Oh, who gives a shit? We'll just let that go.
There was a derailment in Miami the other day, and somebody actually got killed. Where's the outrage? Okay.
Is there a chemical spill in Miami? Is there a chemical spill in Miami? It shouldn't be happening in Miami either, but was there a chemical spill in Miami?
Use alert. We have 1.6 million attorneys in the United States that clean up this mess through litigation. So the thing is, that's where.
I see. So after you're happy, just to make sure that I understand you correctly, you're quite happy for there to be all these regulations that tell lawyers that they can't criticize the legal profession, that create 70,000 pages of regulations in relation to tax. You're quite happy for the government to step in on all these other things, but when it comes to a massive chemical spill in Ohio, why should the government be involved at all? Let private enterprise deal with it.
Hey,
Mark, I just asked Nick a question.
Hold on a second. I had a quick question to ask.
Quickly, I want to follow up on Nick.
War in Ukraine is much bigger.
Nick, high up on your list is heart disease. What do you, Nick? You brought up heart disease. The federal government. What do you want the federal government to do? Require diets, exercise. How are they supposed to get involved as opposed to personal responsibility?
Federal government needs to prioritize their time. In other words, anybody who's in time management or an executive position knows you have to bring to the forefront the most important issues first and relegate the other ones down.
Well, that sounds nice, and everybody agrees to that. But what's that to do with heart disease?
Heart disease is up there. It's way above a train derailment.
So what do you want the federal government to do? Tell you what to eat, when to exercise?
Well, the thing is, there is some point to that, Lee. Okay, in other words, this goes back to personal responsibility. A lot of the reasons we have heart disease is we have obesity epidemic in the United States. I mean,
right? I agree with that.
Area, but come to the South. Come to where Mark Lee lives. Come to my area. Well, actually, Mark lives in Durham, and they're pretty good shape there. But
I'm from Georgia.
Obesity is rampant. 40% of the population of the United States is overweight and obese. Okay, so what could the government do about it? Remember our fast food nation? Do we really need a fast food nation in the United States? And why isn't that a priority, which kills 400,000 people as opposed to a train derailment in Ohio? So why?
I'm on board with that. What are your solutions?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, you're going to the day?
Hold on a second. Nick, are we going to have the government imposing where the McDonald's and other things can be placed? Because I agree that it is the fast food nation.
Mark, Bloomberg tried to do that in New York City, getting rid of big gulps. You can't buy something over 16 ounces. It didn't go over well.
That's what they call a good start, especially when you're talking about these high calorie soda drinks. See, it's unfortunate that people aren't smart enough to say, "Hey, I'm just going to not drink this stuff." So the thing is, unfortunately, we do need to create a system that discourages fast food nation. It started off by putting the calories on some of these places.
No, I got the calories thing, but is David, the founder of Wendy's, ancestors or Ray Kroc's ancestors going to actually, because I don't think either one of them are living, are going to be able to be told where they can place their restaurants and everything? And how is that going to go over?
It's like smoking. Okay, why don't we just have cigarettes on every bloody block? It's because
Nick
figured out cigarettes are dangerous.
Nick, when you were a kid, were there calories counts on all the products? We were much thinner back then.
Franchises out, shut them all down. In other words, the thing is, we don't need fast food nation. You just get rid of them, and make it extremely difficult, just like cigarettes, for people to get a hold of them. And that I'm not sure if it's going to cure the obesity problem, but it's certainly a step in the right direction. So goodbye McDonald's, goodbye Wendy's, goodbye all the junk food that you love to eat, because it's addictive, it's bad for you, it's like cigarettes, it's like alcohol, and it creates obesity, heart disease, runs up our medical bills in the United States of America. And
Nick, there are going to be people like Mark and myself say maybe that's a racist policy, because where are these fast food restaurants? They're in poor neighborhoods. Neighborhoods for you we can't afford to go to.
But the thing is, it could be a positive racist policy, okay? Because the thing is, what happens is it may kill, and Mark will have to do the study on that, an enormous amount of blacks relative to whites. But it doesn't matter. It kills people, all right? And that is a priority, or should be a priority other than a stupid train derailing
Nick, whenever Democrats have tried to help people of colour or blacks specifically, hasn't worked out that well. So leave them alone.
Yeah, I was going to ask Shaquille, from an economic standpoint, how would that work? Because I'm thinking that would be a serious blow if we took out the fast food.
It wouldn't. It wouldn't work. That's why Nick likes it.
Just take it out.
That's why Nick likes it, because it wouldn't work. It doesn't make any economic sense.
A lot of kids would go hungry. They can't get that dollar meal.
And I'm 39. Nick, I'm 39 years old. I don't need government to tell me what I can and can't do. If I want to have a cigarette, which I just had, then I'm going to have a cigarette. Thank you very much. If I want to drink too much, which I frequently do, then that's what I'm going to do. I'm 39. My mother hates me smoking, okay, but she's given up on telling me not to, and the government can go and jump in a lake because I will not be giving up for them.
Shaquille, along those same lines, because I had a question, it's a legal question, because there's been this whole conversation, we've had it here on the show, about discrimination rules and everything. I do not know that much. I've got maybe one or two friends from Seattle, but I don't know that much about Seattle. I imagine there's a large Indian population, but apparently they have added caste to the whole list. So it's now, orientation, race, gender, and now also caste there in Seattle and everything. So is this something we're going to see as a trend? Because they've added this to the anti-discrimination laws, coming to Nick's point about lawyers, because now there's a whole other group of folks that can now decide to sue because they've been added in Seattle. And I know that Marksville and Cary have a large Indian
this is just more.
That's just the Indians.
This is just more.
We're going to add caste.
Well, this is just more woke nonsense, right? This is just trying to do something about the fact that many Indians like myself bring up caste when it comes to matters of discrimination. Now they've jumped on that and said, okay, well, we'll shut them up by putting the caste system in there. But what you do with somebody like me, my family is so many generations away from India, and it's arguable where we came from. When the British took my family from India, they didn't keep any records or anything like that. So we have no idea, and also the religion that most of my Indian family hold doesn't have a caste system in the first place. So we have no idea about caste in the first place. We don't know. We don't even know what our caste would have been. We can guess, but we don't really know. So what happens then? If somebody like me is in Seattle and I'm running a company and I don't employ people of a certain caste, I wouldn't know what caste they are in the first place. It's not like skin color where you can just tell. You'd have to actually be aware of what the caste system is. So what would happen if you're a white person? What would happen if Lee, I assume Lee's not Indian, okay, and I assume that Lee's a male, who knows these days. Let's say that Lee goes to Seattle and sets up a company and he employs 5 Indians and they all happen to be of a higher caste. Is Lee discriminating against the lower caste? Or does he not know? What is he supposed to do? Is he then supposed to go and ask them, what caste are you? Well, an Indian who has moved from India off the lower caste is probably not going to want to tell you that they come from a lower caste. They might lie. How do you fix this?
People of different castes wear different clothing by color, so people will easily see what caste anyone belongs.
Not necessarily.
Well, Sasha, that might be the case in India, right? Mm-hmm. But if these people are living in America, they're more likely they're not going to be adopting American fashion, American mannerisms, things like that. And let's talk about this. The caste system is going to it runs for generations, right? So what happens if it's a third generation Indian who's lived in the United States for the last, his family's lived in the United States for the last 80 years? How are you supposed to?
How people in India know who belongs to which caste?
I don't know. I've never been.
Or any documentation, like how it works.
Well, I'm not 100% sure, Sash, because I've never lived in India and I've never been to India. But I do know certainly that the Hindus, and I'm not trying to pick on them because the caste system is more than just Hinduism. But the Hindus, there's basically like a hierarchy of people that that people just know where they fit. Right, and you've got like the Dalits or the untouchables at the bottom. You've got the Brahmin caste, the warrior caste up the top, and then you've got all these different castes in between.
Shaquille, this is like some countries royalty.
Shaquille, former world champion Vishwananand Anand, he belonged to the highest caste of them all.
Well, that's right. Most successful Indians do. But most successful Indians do. So my cousin knows a lot more about the caste system than I do. He says that we are one of the subcastes of the warrior caste. So within the caste, you also have all of these subcastes. Now, the Brahmin caste, it's a bit interesting because the Brahmin caste didn't really ever do anything. It was always the warrior caste that were, the bankers and they did all this sort of stuff. The Brahmin caste just lived at the temples, but that sort of changed over time. But my point being that you're basically trying to push an anti-discrimination thing onto white Americans and just Americans that don't know anything about the caste system. How is that going to work? What are you going to do? And as I said, for somebody like myself who is ethnically Indian, what are they going to do? They're going to march me into court and say, well, look, you employed 5 Indians, you employed 10 Indians, but you didn't employ any Indians of this particular caste. I don't know any better. I think this just sounds ridiculous.
The one lone vote actually kind of agree with you because Council Member Sarah Nelson, who cast the lone dissenting vote, said the ordinance is a reckless, harmful solution to the problem for which you have no data or research. This could generate more anti-Hindu discrimination and could dissuade employers from hiring South Asians. The community that is being impacted is deeply divided on this issue. So she's actually agreeing with what you're saying, that it could stop folks that are. And Seattle is a tech area, and they do have a high amount of Indians that are in that tech field that could dissuade, say, a Microsoft from wanting to hire more Indians.
Well, I think what they're trying to do, I understand, right? I do, and I think what they're trying to do is a good thing. I don't think that anybody should be discriminated against, and certainly when you've got like Indian-heavy industries, which tech tends to be dominated by Indians, they're going to know the caste system a bit better. But I would think that this should just fall under discrimination, more generally, because discrimination laws more generally. To make it specific to caste means that, as I said, if you, if Lee sets up a company, if Sasha sets up a company in Seattle, what are they expected to do? How do they comply with this sort of a rule? This is the same thing I said about the LGBTQ community and the non-discrimination rules there. I don't think that anybody should be discriminated against things, for things that are certainly legal for them to do. If you're gay, you're gay. But if you start having a quota that you need to employ a certain amount of gay people, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to ask people what their sexuality is at the job interview.
We already do that with race. For affirmative action, we ask, "What race are you?" You have to check a box.
Yeah, but I oppose. But as I said, Lee, I oppose that for the most part. There are exceptions. There are times when I think that affirmative action in over history has been necessary and has been a good thing. But the idea of having race-based quotas, I've said many times before, I don't like them. I really, really don't like them. But for the same reason, because what happens if you don't look like the race that you're a part of? Then what? Then you tick the box, and if you're too white, then they're going to go, well, you pass for white. Are you really of this? It just becomes this huge mess. We saw this with Elizabeth Warren. It just becomes this huge mess, and people end up falling over themselves in order not to offend anybody and not to feel like they're excluding anybody. And, it just makes some people feel as though they're not getting the same opportunities. It doesn't make it better, in my opinion. It can make it worse. It can benefit some, but there's a lot of people that doesn't benefit.
They don't make things better, and I don't know why they're doing this so many years after the fact. And yes, I am a supporter of civil rights, and I'm an admirer of many of our civil rights leaders. But with somebody, maybe Nick or anybody else that's in the legal field can explain to me why the family of Malcolm X is announcing a $100 million lawsuit alleging that the New York Police Department,
for publicity, Mark,
and the CIA
for publicity, for publicity. Anybody here really think they're going to win $100 million from the CIA and the FBI, really, and then the New York Police Department? This is for publicity. That's all it is. It's Black History Month. Let's see the government get some people behind it. Maybe they'll raise some money that they'll get some sort of frivolous lawsuit going, and what else would the reason be?
Well, the family claims new information has come to light that alleges conspiracy and the fraudulent concealment of evidence in the assassination of Malcolm X. And civil rights attorney Ben Crump said that during a news conference as they announced that they were suing the FBI, the CIA, and the New York Police Department for their handling of the civil rights leader's 1965 assassination. So for years, our family has fought for the truth to come to light concerning his murder, and we like our father to receive the justice that he deserves, is what Ilyasah Shabazz, which is Malcolm X's daughter, or one of the daughters, said at the press conference. She accused
a little late
government agencies of fraudulently concealing evidence that they conspired to and executed their plan to assassinate Malcolm X, according to Reuters. And it's not just about the trigger man, it's about who conspired with the trigger man to do this dastardly deed, is what Crump, the attorney, said.
If the conspiracy theory is true, if it's true, how are you ever going to be able to prove that? It'll be classified, it'll be buried in secret government documents. You're never going to be able to prove it.
Yeah, that's what I said. It's going to be hard to prove. But, the other time that it's come up is when folks have been prosecuted, when they've admitted to wrongdoing. But I'm also not a big fan of going after somebody decades after the case has happened, because definitely there is known facts that there were people involved in the Emmett Till case that admitted to lying and everything, but they're now like 90, 95, 100 or something like that. So I don't know that even sentencing them to prison for their actions of being a teenager or a young person are going to be worth it, because one, I guess you could get the satisfaction of them being prosecuted, but are they actually going to put them in jail? And if they put them in jail, how much longer are they going to be in jail and all of that? So that didn't make much sense.
There's no statute. If it's a murder or something like that, there's no statute of limitations on that. And frankly, if you happen to be 95 and you finally get caught for a murder that you committed decades ago, and you have to spend the last few years of your life disgraced in jail, I don't have a problem with that.
Mark, what exactly is your problem?
On many other crimes, I would say, yeah, once enough time's gone by, the crime should be prosecuted. But if you've killed someone and taken someone else's life, you deserve to have as much dignity as possible. Sorry, Lee.
No, Mark, is your problem the length of time, or is it because of the age of the defendant?
It's the age of the defendant. It's also,
Okay, so let's talk about the age of the defendant. You're giving 95-year-olds permission now to commit crimes?
Well, I'm saying if they committed the crime when they were much younger and everything, and then they are finally caught for that crime, how much of that time is gone by, and there's all that contamination of evidence that happened so long ago and everything? How is it going to be?
Let's assume there's no contamination. Let's assume we're not talking about this question of the guilt, okay? Let's say that there's incontrovertible proof that they're guilty. People are still going after Nazi during the, who are there in the camps, rightfully so. Eichmann, obviously not now, but there are other people who may still, let's say, are alive. And there's clear evidence who was there making orders, following them out, the ovens and whatever else. These people should get a pass just because it's the length of time?
Well, by that same notion, there is accusations, and I'm not saying that the accusations are true, because I don't know the accusations. I don't know whether they are true or not. But one of our biggest heroes right now is the leader of Ukraine. If they find out later that he is a member of the Nazi Party, even though he is the biggest supporter right now of everybody's on Zelensky's side, but let's just say hypothetically,
he wasn't born during World War II. He's too young.
But you can still be a neo-Nazi after the fact of the war.
Just because someone's a Nazi, and I think it's horrible, doesn't mean they committed a crime. Am I wrong?
No, I got your point, but I'm just saying there are accusations that crimes were committed by neo-Nazis both here and in other countries as well. I'm just saying if
those who are guilty go after.
Revered hero is actually involved in.
But I think it's very dangerous if we're going to start criminalizing discriminate viewpoints because we don't like them as horrible as they may be.
Yeah, and I'm saying, and that's even come up. I just talked about Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. There are people that have looked at their history after the fact, and some of that was not the prettiest history in the world. So I guess the question is, how much of that overall picture of the history do we want to look at or not look at? Because that even goes back to, Jefferson had a what some people would call a kept woman in his house and everything. That's what Sally Hemings was in a lot of modern day terminology and all in that kind of way. But that is part of the colorizing of the way that people are viewing Jefferson over the last decade or two. Is that fair? Jefferson was definitely one of the founders, but he was also involved in the slave trade and had a slave mistress.
If these are facts, I don't know why someone would want to cover them up. Just to polish the image is this because we looked up to these people. We should give an accurate description of how they lived. That I'm on board, but in terms of the crime,
that was a different era. Sorry, go.
Go on, I'm finished. I think a lot of the Kennedy.
No, I agree with a different woman, a different era.
Dan, you wanted to say something?
Jefferson just was a man ahead of his time.
Jefferson was a man ahead of what?
Two ways, Dan.
Well, he had a black mistress, but she was part of his family. He treated her like family, not like a slave.
Right. I mean, he took her to Paris, and there were other things that some folks say that he treated her like a part of the family. There is some argument as to whether he did or did not. And like I said, neither one of us were there at that time and everything.
Yeah, none of you were there. The evidence is that he did, though. And so, being critical of Jefferson is a little bit late,
So she was very close family to him. Right?
Yeah. Poor guy. Poor guy needed companionship in his old age. What can we say?
One of the groups, Nick and Dan probably going to get on my case for bringing this up, but we are a news story and we are a news agency to some degree and everything. So what are we hearing about this whole thing going on with the Mormon church? Because that was the other thing that I did see in the news, where they are kind of being fined over claims that they hid the 32 million of investment. So there's all this kind of stuff going on. I don't know anything about it, but they are talking about shell companies as well. So is there any reason?
It was a disclosure issue, and they basically gave him a pat on the wrist, $5 million fine, and a $36 billion investment portfolio was a slap on the wrist. They probably came up with some sort of settlement. They are a nonprofit organization. There is some question of whether or not they really have a reporting requirement like that. And for years they didn't. And so it's just a technicality. They blew it and they're paying a fine. Big deal.
Gotcha. Well, as long as that's not a big deal, that is a good thing. I was actually interviewing a woman yesterday that's part of the Shirley Lou show that we do on Tuesday, and it's usually their agents who are in the insurance space sharing their lives and how they got involved in that financial space. And at one point she did say that she was involved in I believe it was a Christian church, and was in their budget committee, and she did say that one of the reasons she had to walk away is because she saw that while she had no problem with tithing, that there were some we'll just say indiscrepancies, and she had to make a ethical decision as to whether she was going to be part of that or whether she was going to walk away. And I think she opted to walk away from what I remember of that interview yesterday. But folks can go back and catch the Shirley Lou show that airs on Tuesday to hear her own comments about that. So I don't want to speak words.
Mark, I'm going to change a little bit. I have a question for you guys. Congress is the only one that can declare war, not the president. Is there a point in time where Congress is going to get involved with what we're doing with Ukraine? As opposed to give the president permission to do whatever he wants, in terms of sending funds or tanks or whatever?
I mean, if the U.S. goes into war action, I think Congress would have to be involved, if I remember.
Well, financially, we're there already.
Right.
Well, we're just.
So your argument is that financially we're there, so they need to vote to declare.
They should do something. Tell the president either give him permission to do what he wants or get the hell out. But someone should own up to this.
Well, the problem is.
I'm not taking a position. I'm just saying Congress should. Why do we have Congress?
That's always a good question, Lee. But the president is the commander in chief of the.
100%, but he can't declare war, and then he only gets a certain amount of time going to war before he does.
We're not at war with Russia, but what we're doing is we're supporting Ukraine by handing them arms to defend themselves. So that situation can go on for a long time until
with nothing, but
until
with no
grows up, I guess.
It is very strategic decision as well because it preserves order that was established in the world after Second World War, 1945.
Sasha, I agree with all that, but where is Congress on this?
Which Congress? What are you talking about?
United States Congress. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do what we're doing. I'm saying how much authority does the president have to spend billions of dollars, supply weapons, with Congress not doing anything at a certain point in time? This really, basically, this is war.
Excuse me, Congress is now controlled by Republican Party, okay? So Republican Party, apparently, according to
The House is.
job, right?
The Democrats control the
What's the
Senate.
difference? Which party?
Well,
Why is that relevant?
Republican Party now controls the House, as we know.
And
right?
therefore,
in your opinion, they're not doing their job.
100%. Yes.
No, right to your
What is their job to do?
right to Donald Trump, right to
They have to declare war or tell the president, stop it.
So,
You don't have authority to do this.
Let me get this right, Sasha.
Where are they getting the money from, Nick?
The military budget. In other words, the Congress
They should cut it off.
military budget.
Cut it off, I
And
guess, is what you're saying.
Biden,
Once-
commander-in-chief of the U.S. forces.
Well, the military does not have an unlimited budget.
Well, no, they
Well,
don't.
they
They
don't.
have 845.
This is why right
billion,
now the
135
goal
acres.
is to finish the war with Russia as soon as possible. Actually, I'll tell you this. Ukraine is now getting more arms, more weapons from the West and United States that it can even employ and store. They're just being bombarded. Here are so many tanks. Here are so many weapons. There are so many ammunitions here and there. And Ukrainians are getting their busy 24 hours a day to accept it all. So Ukrainians are now building the strongest, the biggest, the most effective army in Europe. It's gonna be a military superpower because when you will see when Russia will start go apart, Ukraine will absorb a lot of Russian territories. And
Do you really believe that's a good idea?
well, look at it this way. If let's see a territory in Russia close to Ukraine, let's see cities like Belgorod, Kursk, Rostov. Let's see if they have referendum and they want to get out of Russia. But there will be no Russia, actually, as we see today. So they want to join Ukraine, simple and pure. So Ukraine now has to vote to accept them to be part of Ukraine or not. Let's see, probably they will vote to accept them. So they will accept probably most of the European territory of Russia. So what's going to left in Russia? It will be some Siberian territories, which will be all ruled by Chinese by that time. And essentially, Russia will disintegrate. There will be no such country. So then Ukraine is becoming number one power in Europe, not only from...
When Ukraine becomes Russia.
Well, you can say so.
I think that's a delusional belief.
You can say so.
No, it's no different.
It's one of the very viable scenarios because if Ukraine will get all Russian armies out of its territory, then it's the end of Putin's regime. Putin is gone, probably physically. So now Russia will have to select how it's to be governed. And guess what? A lot of territories that are not connected to Moscow directly, but a little bit farther, like Tatarstan, like Yekaterinburg, like many places in Siberia, they will say, do we really need Moscow? What is good for? What Moscow has lately done for us? Did they win the war against Ukraine? Oh, they didn't win the war against Ukraine. Go hell out. We know how to govern our provinces and our places, our cities, and we don't need Moscow then. And then what
Morning,
Moscow,
everybody.
what Moscow has? Hello. So what Moscow is going to do? Going to fight Tatarstan and the cities like Yekaterinburg or Novosibirsk or all the territories in the Far East? No, it has no clue how to do it. It has no power. So Russia is now disintegrating. The process is already underway. People just don't understand that, but it is what's happening there. There is a huge power vacuum. Do you think Putin is really ruling Russia these days? He's whistling between his generals and people like Kadyrov or this idiot Prigozhin and other warlords and so on. And they're not really there to fight Ukraine. No, they are preparing to post Putin's Russia and how to fight. There is trillions of dollars, different businesses, the resources, just anything. And remember one thing, in Russia, power and wealth go together, always together. If you don't have power, you don't have wealth. If you don't have wealth, you have no power whatsoever. So therefore, they're preparing to post Putin's Russia.
It's not restricted to Russia, Sasha.
No, that's not just restricted to Russia. Hey, I did have a question.
That's the new world order, don't you know?
And I'm glad that Steve's here because, Steve, a couple of things. One, we were talking earlier about Ohio, and we're waiting to see when Biden's going to go visit Palestine, Ohio. But apparently Trump's going to go visit Ohio right now and everything. Of course, there's the border policies and all in those lines. And some people are saying that the Biden policies are very much mirroring what the Trump policies were, because apparently he's trying to crack down on the border. But that's not the question I had for you, Steve.
Well, can I just respond? Can I respond to that just very quickly? Because I just went to your border. I just went to your border, and can I just very quickly say? Well, I was just going to say one sentence. It was actually slightly more difficult for me to go to the United States this time than what it has been under President Trump or under President Obama. I actually required a little bit more paperwork to be able to go. So that was interesting. I wasn't expecting that.
Because you came here legally, Shakil.
Yeah, you got here legally and everything. But
I came here legally the last few times as well.
The question I had for
you don't need any paperwork to come back.
What are we thinking about competency tests? Because apparently Nikki Haley, she's a candidate, has said that Bernie Sanders is exactly the reason mental competency tests are needed, and she is pushing this whole idea of a competency test for those that are running. So, Steve, are you ready for a competency test should you decide to run for national office? Because apparently Nikki Haley is saying that that's what we need is a mental competency test.
Bring it on. I'm ready to go. I recited all 46 presidents by heart last week, 2 days ago. I'm ready. And I'm ready, guys. I'm ready for.
All right. Who was president number 17?
Hey, but real quickly, I did want to let you know that a couple things. The secretary of the EPA is actually from North Carolina, Michael Regan, and he's coming here at the end of March. But he's in the middle of this whole train wreck, and it's crazy. And the other thing we haven't talked about is the Supreme Court decision, Gonzalez versus Google. And it looks like the U.S. Supreme Court is not going to change the law that would protect tech companies from legal blame, right? And that's what is issue here. And of course, Sasha just talked about Putin as we get to Friday, which we're going to dedicate. I'll be from PBS, Carolinas on that day, Friday, but we're going to talk about whole show on Ukraine, even though Sasha Star has his own show. But Biden, coming to Poland and pretty interesting stuff. I don't think that I think politicians should be competent. Right, mentally.
Steve, we have a problem with that. If you're going to start giving competency tests, we have politicians in office now who would not pass a mental competency test, such as what's going on in Pennsylvania, and we also have ones who physically won't pass because they have handicaps. How would that work out, as opposed to leave it up to the voters?
Yeah, I don't know, Lee. I mean, that's
Well, maybe what should happen then, Lee, is the voters should have to do a competency test before they get to vote.
Well, there would be a plan.
There's a way to clear the voter rolls.
Shakil, and don't forget people who conduct those tests. They have to be very, very
That's right. No, I just want to come back to the border thing because I thought that would actually be something of some interest to you guys. So as you know, I'm in Canada, and so. Because I always visit whenever I'm in North America, I'll always visit my family, and then I will drive down. I've got some family in Seattle. I've got some family in Oregon as well. So I'll normally go through there, and then I'll go down to California, and then I'll go to wherever else I'm going to go to in the United States. So I've got family in California as well. So normally you just cross at the border. and you go across, you fill out some paperwork. It's a bit different for Canadians because they don't need the paperwork. But if you're from a visa waiver country, which I'm from 2 visa waiver countries, you go there, you fill out some paperwork. The first time you do it, you get fingerprinted. They take a photograph of you. And then the last several times I've come to the United States, I didn't need to be fully fingerprinted. I just needed to put 2 fingers on the thing, and away I went. So if you fly into the United States, you have to apply for an ESTA, an Electronic Travel Authority form. Now, if you're crossing by land, you don't need to do that. However, that's changed, and it's only been a fairly recent change, so I believe it changed late last year. So now, regardless of how you enter the United States, you have to have an ESTA. So I applied for mine. I put it in last night, obviously. Working hours, business hours is closed in America, so I put it in last night. And this morning, it was all approved in about sort of 15, 20 minutes or something like that. It was approved. But what I found was interesting, I also need to fill out, I think it's called an I-94 form, or I've got to get the CBP1 app, and then I have to, I assume, notify them before I come and fill out my form and all the rest of it. That's a lot more steps than what was involved before. So I was actually reading up on the app, and I was reading up about some of this stuff, and there was some criticism that Biden put this in there to help to process the asylum seekers and help process the immigrants. And there was some criticism that some of them have poor English skills, and this was becoming, more tedious for them, and it was unfair on some of them because there was some glitches in the program and all that sort of stuff. But I have to actually say, for the criticism that I and some other panelists have levelled at the so-called open border policy that Biden and Kamala Harris have on the southern border, these restrictions are slightly inconvenient for me, but these sorts of things actually seem to be not a bad way of dealing with it. It's not a bad way of processing people. But they've got to iron out the glitches and the bugs in the system. But I actually don't think that is such a bad idea. I think this is actually probably a sensible way of dealing with what the Biden administration has been dealing with. So I'll give credit where credit's due.
Yeah, speaking of that, and speaking of glitches and everything, there is you're talking about tech, and definitely tech is being used for immigration, but tech is being used for a little bit of everything, including something that got some folks in trouble, because I know that I've got friends that have been using ChatGPT regularly to write letters and everything that they're doing, whether it's business letters or whether it's other types of letters that they are trying to create. And apparently Vanderbilt got in trouble because they had to apologize because ChatGPT was what they used to console those students up there in an email after the Michigan shooting. So I don't know what it said, but everything. But actually, Laura Ingraham, who we know is a Fox News person, said nowhere is stupidity more evident than in the academic world. And I know there's something that Nick and you talk about as well. But apparently, they were writing a letter to get their students to have an understanding and console folks after this horrible shooting that took place there in Michigan. And maybe what it said wasn't all that great. That's what and I don't know what it actually wrote, but apparently they had to apologize because they didn't decide to do it themselves. They decided to let this app that is becoming very popular be what would write what was going to console these students.
Mark, some of the stupidest people we have are the most educated.
I'm sure that the Dean Dan Worthington there would be able to tell you that probably some of the smartest people and some of the stupidest people he's ever met have been at university colleges, university campuses and college campuses.
Amen, brother.
I'm sure he probably has seen some very smart people and some very brilliant folks, but he's probably also seen some folks he's going like, how did you even get into this college that he is at? Shaquille, I did have to ask something to you because I know that a lot of times you are critical of me and others that are quote unquote woke folks.
I noticed.
But apparently there is a conservative entrepreneur and an anti-woke crusader that has jumped into the GOP presidential race, and apparently he is an Indian American millionaire, and they do say that he is a long shot, but Vivek Ramaswamy has jumped into the race and everything. So I didn't know if you had any thoughts about this person and whether he even has. They're already saying he's a long shot, so apparently he doesn't have much of a shot. But hey, stranger things have happened.
Well, I've never heard of the guy, so I can't have much of a comment. But I will say this.
Okay, you have to look him up.
I think there's a difference between calling out woke stuff when it doesn't make any sense, and when it's not helpful, when it becomes harmful rather than helpful to a particular cause. You've got to be careful of not going on the attack, or which I fall into this all the time. It sounds like I'm trying to attack people sometimes, but you've got to be careful of not coming across really right wing. So if you don't agree, like we talked before about affirmative action, right? And I've outlined why I have some concerns about it. I don't think that what I'm saying could be interpreted as deliberately holding back people of color. It's because I don't think it helps people of color; it hurts them. You got to be very careful when you make your argument that if your argument is I'm on your side, but I don't think this is a good solution. That's one argument. If you're just going to call out the woke and just, you're all crazy, you just want to attack them, well, then it just becomes a tit for tat shit fight, and that doesn't help anything. And you see that there was an influencer, I forget his name's at Tate or something, some sort of influencer in the UK that was sort of going on the anti-woke crusade. He got some followers, and then he got in trouble for human rights abuses or slavery or something. I mean, you see a lot of this sort of stuff go on where it's just attacking for the sake of views on the internet. Well, that doesn't really achieve much.
Couple of comments about this so-called Republican race. Okay, so there is Trump, who declared first, and he's there, and everybody knows what he stands for, and so on. So there are now some people like this guy, Vivek somebody, and then there is Nikki Haley, and then there are some second-rated people are sort of getting in. And remember, everything what they're pronouncing is in tune with Trump's policies. Now, interesting is that heavyweights like this guy, say Mike Pompeo, for example, or perhaps later on Mike Pence, or perhaps Florida. Ron DeSantis, right? They're not hurrying up because they want to avoid confrontation with Trump. So what they're waiting for, it's about any time now, Trump is going to be indicted in Georgia. And once first indicted is announced, there will be several different indictments which will take him out of Republican race. So that's a time when DeSantis and when all others, they will go in, they will declare whether they will 100% agree with Trump policies or not 100%, but only 75%. It doesn't matter, but because the field will be wide open, and so Republican Party will have chance to be reborn, to be vital, to exchange ideas, and to stand for something. Because now, when Trump is, by all polls, he is so much in the lead, and once the others, like even Ron DeSantis, will jump in, Trump will maxloud them, and he will just make a joke out of each and every one, and they want to avoid, because they want to build a political career. They don't need direct confrontation with Trump.
That's correct.
So this is their strategy. Yep.
Sasha, even if Trump doesn't run, he's still going to have his opinions, and his followers will still listen to them.
When he's indicted, his opinion means nothing, really.
To you, maybe, not to millions of others.
Hey, listen, his opinion means nothing to you now, Sasha. So
Yep.
why does it matter whether he's indicted or not?
Well, if he's indicted, that put him in a special category of indicted.
Maybe not. You don't know what's going to happen.
Well, it's
We don't know what's going to happen in
now
that
the-
case.
Folks, it's that time for closeout. I will say that I still predict that Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee because he might be able to be removed from office, but an indictment's not going to be enough from preventing him from running or winning the nomination. The more non-Trump people that get in an American system where the extremes of the political parties enable you to win a primary with 30-35%, you still got a lot of chances. Speaking of presidents, I want to close out today with continuing to pray for the family of Jimmy Carter, the 39th president of the United States, who at the age of 98 is facing death with such courage and purpose and focus. He says he's lived a long and productive life, and he is now ready to leave this world. But I will say that he is the one president that I truly believe was able to use the White House as a stepping stone to greater things, helping those around the world to deal with free and fair elections in Haiti, attacking diseases through the Carter Center like guinea worm, helping build homes for Habitat for Humanity, this president worked as hard as an ex-president as he did in the White House. And yes, he wasn't revered as a very effective president and was a president during the Iran hostage crisis and the oil embargoes, and I mean, just the oil crisis and everything going on. But I think history will remember him as a president and a very engaged global citizen, a winner of a Nobel Peace Prize. I will end with this. I met him at Emory University, and the one thing people don't remember about him was that he was a very stern and strict man. Even if copies were double-sided, if pens were misplaced on his desk, the president would scream and get angry, and many people would be afraid when he would come in. They would actually take 2 days off. He wasn't the soft-spoken kind of gentle Southern gentleman.
That sounds mature.
But one day a student asked him.
Anger management problem.
But one day a student asked the president, they said, didn't you make mistakes, small mistakes when you were growing up? And he said, no, I did not. Because you don't grow up on a farm, work 3 jobs, go into the United States Navy, captain a submarine, go become a legislator and a governor, and then the president of the United States. This was a man who dotted the I's and crossed the T's. And I think that he was one of the finest citizens our nation to produce. We wish him well. I know Republicans out there thought he was an awful president, but I've talked to many, many Republicans who believe he
was a lousy president. Most people think he's a lousy president.
But he was an amazing man, and I think that he is an amazing man. And so we pray for his family. And hopefully,
that's true. He did a lot of good after his presidency.
And hopefully he'll set a good example of the change we can make. But thank you all. We'll be talking about Ukraine tomorrow. I'm working on getting us a special guest for Friday. We're reaching out to Professor Claus over at UNC, and we're going to be talking about Ukraine on Friday from PBS Carolina. Thank you all so much for being
Steve,
with us.
I'm about to come to America. I'm going to make no more comments about American politics. I'm just going to watch you guys. Can you arrange the popcorn, please? This is going to be fantastic.
Popcorn's fun.
Popcorn's fun. I love it. I got some over there. Popcorn. I'll bring up the popcorn. Thank you, guys. Be safe.
Yep.
All right.